his first time here, my second at this particular dungeon. And it's always a solemn feeling to be here because of what it represents. But we hope that today this journey will enlighten us even more so, especially me a second time and he for the first time, and our family. So, Akwabe and Badase at the end.
So if there's any question, comments, just let me know. And our tour is actually going to take us about an hour. We'll first see the male dungeons. We'll talk about these graves. There's a condemned cell, we get to see it. The door or gate of no return at that same place appears to be the female dungeons. We'll move upstairs to some of the rooms the Europeans were using. A church right above us, we get to see that as well. Our focus today would be on the transatlantic slave trade. Just that most of the things we're going to talk about will be issues that happen within this castle in terms of the English involvement in the trade. We stand right inside Cape Coast slave dungeons, others will say Cape Coast Castle, which happens to be the third and the smallest out of the three Europeans built in here, of which along the coast of West Africa, about 60 forts and castles were built in here. But then Ghana alone had more than 40 because of gold. Gold those days actually was attracting most of the Europeans here, and to that, they named this place as the Gold Coast. Nigeria, Benin, Niger, a portion of Togo had the name Slave Coast, because that was where most of the West Africans actually were captured from. So then Ivory Coast and others all had their names based on the resource the Europeans actually were getting from their land. And me saying that most captives were coming from Nigeria, Benin, Niger, forts and castles in Ghana means they had to walk all the way from those areas down to this point. And just imagine yourself walking from Accra to this place, or probably from Kumasi to this end. But this time around, they were walking beyond these areas. So majority of them would die. Once you die, they just leave you there. Those that were fit enough to make it through the journey. If you get to present day Ghana, the north, they had different slave markets. Salaga, Yendi, Tumu, Pikoro, and other areas. They journeyed them as well to an area called Ase'Ooo. At Ase'Ooo, what they do is actually they give them their last part within the slave river. Right after there, they would shave their beards and hair, or because some were having gray hair, others were very young. So once you shave the young and the old, they all attract the same skin. Before they apply shea butter all over their skin, they would then bring them to the castles. Once you arrive in here, they had a chamber up there called the Palava Hall. And in there, nurses, doctors are to examine you. They will check your pulse, your teeth to determine your strength as to whether you should be categorized as a domestic captive or a commercial captive. The domestic ones were those to work in this castle, and the commercials were to be exported. Then after they've been categorized, they start with the auction. Humans in here were exchanged for goods like gunpowder, mirror, alcoholics, fabrics, leather works, and other European commodities brought in for the exchange. Exchange being made, they gather all the captives at the forecourts. This castle actually was controlled by the Royal African Company, but then they had some crew from Liverpool, Bristol, and then Manchester. So one person wouldn't be allowed to take over all the captives. With that, you mark yours before you keep them in the dungeons. They would set fire, place in metals that had their embossed designs underneath them, others would call it emblems. And once these metals are seen red hot, pick it from the fire, straight into palm oil, from the oil directly onto your chest as a meal. Female on the shoulder, back or arm. Others also prefer taking portion of their ear or probably piercing them just to know whether this group purchased you or the other side purchased you. They separate the males from the females. All males are moving down this way, and all females also into the female dungeons. You stay in the dungeons until your ship is ready. Once there is no ship, you are not allowed to move outside this place. I made mention they built a lot of forts and castles, and out of these 40 forts and castles built in here, was only 3 that were castles. The remaining were all forts, each built for different purposes. Some were serving as watchtower, others were actually dungeons, and some also happens to be garrison or barracks for soldiers to stay in. In In Ghana, the first castle built by the Europeans happens to be the one at Elmina, and it was built by the Portuguese somewhere 1482. Earlier, the place was meant for gold trading, and later the place got converted into a dungeon. The second one is Ase'Ooo, the Christian Ball Castle, which was also built by the Denmark somewhere 1661, using the place for gold, ivory, salt, and other trade. And later, the place became a slave dungeon. Where we stand today, Cape Coast Castle was also built by the English somewhere 1664, and this castle was purposely designed for the transatlantic slave trade. So it is only in Cape Coast Castle you see dungeons designed for humans. And one may ask what even brought about this trade itself. You know, early 1400s, the Europeans were coming to Africa. Some would say they came in as missionaries, others would say they were explorers, some do say they came in as merchants. But I always said the aspect of the human trade also brought them here. And why would I say this? Before Europeans came to Africa, there had once been Arabs in Africa. The Arabs staying in Africa were the north and the east of Africa to trade. Just as these Europeans were doing, they did the same. They would also get natural resources, get humans. Either they moved them to their countries or probably to Europe to be sold. Because you go back in the history, you see that even in Cyprus and other places, Africans were there working for them on the same sugarcane plantations. It got to a point the Europeans actually wanted to break the monopoly that these Arabs have been enjoying for many years. Arabs were the north and the east. So then we can also start a trade either from the center, the west, or the southern part of Africa. Then as war got to that, most of these resources in Africa itself is not in the north or the east, but rather in the center or the west of Africa. Due to the pilgrimage Mansa Musa also had supported their fact, of which Portuguese were the first group in here. And if you have to check the map we have today, from Portugal to Africa, it would have been easier to use the north. But then because the north had already been conquered, then the west was the first place actually they could come in. They started with the barter trade system where they were giving Africans finished goods, taking their resources. Within the 1500s there too, they had a quest to the west because they were seeking routes to India. And they knew if they were to use the east route, they had to use the Arab route. With that, the west became the best alternative. They got to the Americas and as well the Caribbean. Over there, they started plantation on large scale. The Europeans were ready for the proceeds they get from the plantation, but they're not ready to work with their strength. Natives on those lands were those they subjected to work for them on the plantations. Strength and health of these people actually were not helping because they were dying in numbers. Supposedly, two Catholic priests, one by name Manuel, the other also Bartholomew de las Casas, were like, why don't they then shift their demand to Africa? Because the Africans actually have proven to be strong. African system can withstand both tropical disease and as well European diseases. Africans know nothing about the New World, and aside that too, Africans naturally are agriculturists. So if you want the best substitute, then that happens to the Africans. Then they had this Pope by name Pope Nicholas V accepted the fact that they should use Africans, and that whole system started. When they come in here, pick these Africans with the things they brought in, that wouldn't end the trade. Because in the New World too, they are going to exchange humans for sugarcane, tobacco, cotton, coffee, rice, spices, and others. They move them to Europe. In Europe, they are transformed into finished goods, and the finished goods are also coming back to this place for the cycle to start itself again, and that gave us the triangular trade or the transatlantic slave trade. Europe happens to be the origin, Africa happens to be the middle passage or middle point. America, the Caribbean also with the second place, and it starts over again. Questions, comments before?
So, when you say trade, what was it the Africans traded for? What was it that I know we gave our bodies, but what did we get in return? The ones because when you say trade,
yes, so
something the Africans got.
So let me say, they were given gunpowder, mirror, alcoholics, fabrics, ceramics, leatherworks like shoes and other stuffs, sharp objects like different types of knives and all that. That was what they were using in exchange for the natural resources as well for the humans. But then as well, let's also get to that Africans as well played a role in the trade. Historically, all races, all culture, all religions do have their own system of slavery. Just that the African system
had their own form of slavery. Correct.
So, and historically, African system in here was different from what the Europeans brought in. Let me say, we came from different areas, and if I get to fight this group and I defeat them, I fuse them into my system. Correct. To grow from a village to become, let's say, a community. The more communities I conquer, I can grow to become a state. If you do get more states, you grow to become a kingdom, and kingdom also grow to become empire. So knowing the system, it was easier for the Europeans. They studied the environment. With that, they created a new system for the Africans. We call the divide and conquer, or already divided people. African slavery itself also happens to be that if probably this man here is owing me, he can't pay off. So the best he could do was actually to bring a relative to come and serve for some years after you go back to your family members. But then once the person coming to serve puts up good behavior, he can be given kinship title, or probably getting married into the master's family means descendant coming are no longer slaves. Now with this system, let's say happen to be from England, and this man is, let's say, from Netherlands. When we come in, I would make this man my friend. He would also make this man his friend. So I supply him with weapons, he also supply him with weapons. They fight each other. Once he defeats this group, this time you wouldn't keep them there actually to grow again. Rather, you bring them to me. So I give you more weapons to make you powerful, so you go to conquer other places. If he also gets to defeat you, he also brings you to this. So we wouldn't go outside again to do a hunting. Rather, we give you the weapons to fight each other, of which actually helped them to get majority of the captives. Because the chiefs, most of them, their focus was one, their freedom. Once you're able to get the weapons, you also think that you're also powerful. You can also get the land as well. Aside that, the resource on the land now belongs to you. Thirdly, when they come back to buy the resources, they wouldn't go back to the old chief again, because you also own the same land, which is also full of resources. And most of the chiefs, warriors, fell for the act. Aside that, Europeans themselves would also raid, kidnap Africans along the coast. And as well, they had some Africans, we call them raiders or kidnappers. Just as today we have armed robbers for them, they just move into lands, homes, capture humans, bring them here. But then on records, as others do say, nobody was bringing a family member here to be enslaved. I always say that Europeans can determine who happens to be a brother in Africa. Just
Europeans cannot what?
Determine who happens to be a brother in Africa.
Yes.
I'm saying this one because, let's say, in the olden days, he happens to be an Yoruba man, I'm an Igbo. We are all blacks, we are all in Africa, but we're not the same.
Right.
Once we can fight each other to conquer for one to take dominion, we don't see ourselves to be brothers and sisters. Right. Just the same way I can't call a Greece, I can't say a Greece and a Portuguese the same person, the same way they had in Africa.
Correct.
So they had clans, ethnic groups separating them. So through that, if an Igbo man actually sees an Ashanti, they don't see them to be family members. So once I capture, I don't see it to be a brother. Unlike today, you see your African being the same. Those days they were not equal.
Right. So
once I do bring back, doesn't mean I brought in the family member. And then the aspect was, you might be an Ashanti. Today you go to fight an Ase'Ooo. You defeat their group. You bring him to Kiku's castle. The next day he will also come and fight you again. They put up a very formidable team. They fight you, they defeat you, they take you to Christianburg. Your group probably is going to, let's say, Barbados. His group is also going to, let's say, Jamaica. Now, you are there, he's also there, so he's to be blamed.
Okay.
Definitely each group or each tribe probably will end up there, one or the other. That's how the actually system is.
Very clever system, wasn't it?
Yes. So the
perfected over time.
So the African involvement in the trade brought this flag we see here. This flag was unveiled in the year 1992 by the House of Chiefs in Ghana. The chiefs in here admitted the fact that truly their ancestors played a role, because for nothing at all, they gave them lands to construct the castle. I always have this phrase, I say that if there is no market, there wouldn't be a trade. So whether you know what they were using the land for or not, you still made an impact. Aside that, whether they seed or not they seed, you also help them to get the people. Saying that, they brought this just to say they are sorry for their ancestors involving themselves in the trade, and this flag here should always serve as a reminder for we the living today never to involve ourselves in the game. So and as it reads,
so this is from who?
The House of Chiefs in Ghana. So we have let's say
okay.
a group of chiefs.
Got you. Okay.
During the maiden manifest, and it reads, in the everlasting memory of the anguish of our ancestors, may those who died rest in peace, may those who return find their roots, and may humanity never again perpetuate such injustice against humanity, and that we the living here today should vow to uphold this, and never should we allow any human act to happen again. Okay. My reference mostly is on this, we the living. Never did they say that we Ghanaians, nor we blacks, nor we Africans. A living being is a living being. So if you see yourself deemed not to be a slave, then never involve yourself in any activity else.
One last thing I must say before you go. Was there anything like that put here by the Europeans? A plaque like that as to what they have done? Because it was their mindset that created this. Was there a plaque saying that, or maybe that could be found in Europe?
So far, I know nothing of that.
Okay, thank you.
Alright, so this was also unveiled 2009, July 11th. Barack Obama and the wife listed as guests as well. And after the tour, we unveiled this plaque just to appreciate and visiting us. Obama, we all know from Kenya, but then the wife Michelle also got to trace her roots from this town.
Yes,
So when he became the president, Ghana was the first African country they visited. And just as we're taking our tour, the same thing happening here. We are moving into the dungeons.
Okay.
We are moving into the dungeons, and before we move in there, get to that. There's a church up here, and the dungeons right beneath.
Thank you. So go ahead.
Please, we come inside.